That's a very good point indeed. Now, we saw some polling from Essential this week, commissioned by The Guardian, that showed that almost 3/4 of Australians say development of renewables should not come at the expense of local communities. That surprised many people, probably at The Guardian as well. And it also showed attitudes to nuclear changing significantly. More than half of Australians now support nuclear and only 1 in 3 oppose. What do you make of this? Will the PM take this on board, or are Labor just going to be anti-nuclear during Anthony Albanese's first term?
Well, perhaps just to start, I mean, on the rollout of renewables, the issue is not actually capital. The issue is approvals and social licence and local communities who don't like to see new poles and wires and renewables developments in their backyards. And still, there seems to be no real strategy to deal with that, and to kind of just plough through these areas without those local support is politically toxic. So that actually remains the main challenge rather than the money, which is what we heard from the Treasurer today. The nuclear story remains one where, we've got obviously the left part of Labor are just ideologically opposed to it for historic reasons within kind of the green element of that party. I think those of us who work in the industry or follow it closely really think we need to be technology agnostic as to how we have our energy market outlook and strategy. We need to set out our targets in terms of reliability, affordability, and yes, emissions, and then take a technology agnostic approach. Whatever's the best, lowest cost, most efficient way to get there is going to be the only real way to get there, right? And nuclear should not be ruled out from the get-go, which is at the moment. Nuclear could play a very genuine role in Australia's future, but it's not even being allowed to be given the chance to compete.
Well, based on that criteria you just mentioned, nuclear would come out on top, wouldn't it? It's zero emissions, it's reliable, and we know in the long term it's affordable. We've seen it used to good effect in other Western nations. If you're using your test, you would go nuclear every time, wouldn't you?
Look, we do need to factor in there's a time frame and a capital outlay part of nuclear, and the work needs to be done to, I guess, confirm that it does have that role. We've got every reason to believe it should be an important part of the mix and should be considered. I think that, particularly as we walk through the next 5 to 10 years, where we're going to see the logistical, commercial log jams for the renewable rollout, let alone the economic and social licence ones, it's going to become increasingly apparent that we do need to take on board other low or zero emissions technologies like nuclear. And that means we've got to start the work on that now so that we can actually get to the point where we can roll it out at scale towards the end of this decade. And that's why it's so damaging to rule things out at the outset without really considering the fundamentals and the logic, particularly from an emissions perspective, is going to be very counterproductive to what we actually need to do by 2050. Not so worried about what happens in 2030 because we're going to miss all of those targets anyway.
I think we'll miss the 2035 and the 2050 targets as well, Saul. I think we're going to see a fairly dramatic change in direction well before 2050. But to me, it just is absurd that we're sitting on the world's biggest reserves of uranium. We're shipping it off all around the world. We've got countries like Sweden and France using it effectively, and yet our industries and citizens are denied that technology. Saul, thank you so much for your time. Saul
Thank you.
Kavonic there.